show with two retired detectives that were in the thick of New York crime, fast and hectic. They got some stories and some jokes, even an interview with the most popular folks. Off the cuff, one episode just ain't enough. Get a little laughter and an interview too. It's maybe the best thing you can do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, and today with me, I have straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD Detective Phil Grimaldi. How you doing today, Phil?
I'm pretty good, Billy, and I'm so glad that we got our good pal, retired first grade detective Tommy Dades on board.
I reached out to Tommy, and I put him right on the spot, and he was ready. He said he was born ready, so here he is today. And today what we're going to discuss is the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict, which just came in. And no one could really read what this jury was going to do, because usually if someone's going to get acquitted, it happens pretty quickly. And in this case, it took 4 days. So they obviously considered all of the evidence. They considered all the law, and they came back with this. I'm going to now share the screen here, and I'm going to play the judge and as the verdict came in, what they saw in the courtroom here.
Then will rise the jury and hearken to its verdicts.
First count of the information, Joseph Rosenbaum. The jury find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the second count of the information, Richard McGinnis, we, the jury, find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the third count of the information, unknown male, we, the jury, find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the fourth count of the information, Anthony Huber, we, the jury, find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty. As to the fifth count of the information, Gage Rosekreutz, we, the jury, find the defendant Kyle H. Rittenhouse not guilty.
Members of the jury, are these your unanimous verdicts? Is there anyone who does not agree with the verdicts as read?
So that was inside the jury. Very powerful. You could see the defendant, Kyle Rittenhouse, broke down, and he hugged his attorney. Was this unexpected, Phil?
Not in my view at all. I think that I was a little plugged into the case. I won't say 100%, but I was kind of monitoring it especially over the last few days. And this was no surprise to me. I think there was cause early on in this trial that there should have been a mistrial with prejudice based on the antics of the prosecution. I think we could all go over that in the next hour. We're going to do the show, but it was clear that there was really no case, and I'm not surprised by the verdict at all. I think the jury did their job. I think they did it correctly. I applaud them. It was probably very tough, especially with the stuff that was going on outside the courthouse with regard to these protests and whatnot. We had a CNBC reporter following the jury yesterday. We'll talk about that, I'm sure, but absolutely no surprise to me, Billy.
I think that for a lot of these trials, it's very tough to get a jury that is impartial, because so much of the media accounts, they try to get a hold of these jurors, and the judge didn't sequester these juries, these particular jurors, which I found a little strange. What are your feelings on that, Tommy?
They should definitely have been sequestered with, everybody getting threatened, which sadly to say in these days does change the attitude and what verdicts come in, because they don't want mass mayhem afterwards. So they should have definitely been, sequestered. People getting threatened if you come up with the wrong verdict. We're going to kill your family. It's it's absurd that something like that is going to, change what the facts of the case and what the actual law really stands for.
If in this country, if we ever lose the rule of law, then we totally have chaos. And law is the only thing that we have. And look, I don't think, in my own opinion, I don't think Kyle Rittenhouse should have went to Kenosha with an AR-14. I think that was where he erred seriously. I mean, he shouldn't have went there with that. And even, what is a 17-year-old kid doing, thinking providing security for a car dealership or for whoever he was providing security for? But having said that, while he was there, he defended himself, and the jury ruled that it was self-defense. So many people may not like the outcome of this. However, the jury clearly ruled that it was self-defense, and he was acquitted of all 5 charges. One of the other charges, the gun being illegal, the judge threw that out of court because after looking at the law, he realized that he, in fact, was allowed to own that gun because he was 17 years old and it was a certain size. And they never looked into that before. So that charge was thrown out. And when we also discussed this case, when we think about what the riots were about, was the shooting of a man named Jacob Blake. And the officer who shot Jacob Blake was found to be within department and legal guidelines and was totally cleared, not just by the local grand jury, but by the feds also. So these riots were basically over a shooting that was ruled to be justified, as many of these shootings are, and they don't stop the riots. I think that's one of the things that has to be addressed in the future.
Billy, there's 3 things I want to bring up about when you get arrested and you're charged and you're going to trial. Number 1, you have a right to be tried by the jury of your peers, meaning people from the community are the ones that decide your fate. That's number 1. Number 2, you have the right to face your accuser. I mean, there was one charge in particular on this case where the person who they charged him with firing his gun at and missing, the guy who went to stomp on him, was never allegedly notified or contacted by the district attorney's office, the prosecutor's office. So they had a charge in there. It was almost like a ghost charge. They had a charge with a person that was never identified. While the deliberations were going on, we learned that actually that person had been identified and spoken with, and he wanted immunity from prosecution to testify. It wasn't granted, so they didn't use him. However, that should have been turned over to the defense. That's the second thing. And then the third thing is that, when you're in court and you have to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That is something that's a very, very high standard in the American justice system. When you're arrested, you're charged, you go to trial. The judge instructs the jury that when you rule, whether it be specific evidence, fingerprints, DNA, blood, whatever, or circumstantial evidence, your ruling has to be based, if it's guilty, beyond a reasonable doubt. And I think that they acquitted him beyond the reasonable doubt based on the amount of evidence that was produced in this case. And some of the prosecution witnesses were actually in defense of Kyle Rittenhouse. That there was one in particular, the guy who was shot in the arm, that he admitted that he pointed his gun at Kyle. He was pointing his loaded Glock handgun at Kyle Rittenhouse when he was shot. So, I mean, you had clear self-defense right there. So those 3 points, beyond a reasonable doubt, jury appears, and the other one that I stated before, having what was the other one I said? I forgot it already. But the bottom line is that's the justice system in the United States.
One of the Tommy, can I just say something? One of the things I was going to say is that the prosecution in this, will they be disciplined after this trial? Because there was a lot of prosecutorial misconduct in this case. Go ahead, Tommy.
Tremendous amount. I've spoken to ex-high-ranking DAs, who held very high positions, very experienced people. They said they couldn't even watch anything on TV because they were sick to their stomach on what the prosecution was doing. And had they been the ones, and these were guys that were calling the shots in those specific DA's offices in the five boroughs, and they said Ned Day, it would have never even made it to a grand jury. It would have been justifiable homicide from Jump Street.
Some of the people in the chat were asking, what do I mean by should the prosecution be disciplined or sanctioned? One of the things was that he asked a question of the defendant about why he chose to lawyer up, why he chose to be represented by counsel. That is 100% a no-no. A first-year law student knows that. Every cop knows that.
First thing you say when somebody comes to you is lawyer. That's the first words out of your mouth is lawyer.
All right, but in the trial, the prosecutor asked him why he invoked counsel. I mean, and even the judge slapped his hand over that. And, people were saying, oh, the judge was biased. No, when the judge sees someone violating the law in court, he has a duty to say something about it.
Billy, that was on cross-examination. The prosecutor in the case actually said to Rittenhouse, you had no problem remaining silent after the incident up until now. Now, that's his right under the Constitution. In Miranda, you have the right, at the first sentence, you have the right to remain silent, refuse to answer questions. Do you understand? That's the first one that you read in an arrest situation. You continue to have that right throughout unless you decide, which him and his lawyers decided, that he was going to testify. And there was pertinent questions asked. How could a prosecutor ask such a question about him remaining silent? It was within his constitutional rights, and the judge admonished him. And I believe there was a request by defense counsel for a mistrial based on that and many other things. There was, I believe, 4 requests for a mistrial, and the judge had set aside whether or not he was going to rule on those verdicts till after there was whether or not he was going to grant those requests for mistrial after the verdict, which I don't know why he was doing it that way, but he was. And one other thing about the judge, real quick, the judge was appointed. They want to make this a Republican, Democrat, black-white thing, and that judge was appointed by a Democratic politician in Wisconsin. So I think that kind of eliminates that little bit of right and left or Republican and Democrat opinion on this thing.
There's no basis. A Democrat or Republican has no basis. There's penal laws in those states, criminal procedure laws in those states, and the judge has to abide by what they say. He has to instruct the jury, not the prosecution instructing the jury or bringing out the law. It's the judge that's supposed to instruct the jury before they deliberate, and he has to instruct them based on what the law is in that state. So who cares if you're a Democrat or Republican or from Mars? You still got it. You still have to, repeat to the jury what charges that he's got to charge the jury, period. So I don't know why they even care about Democrat, Republican. What is he going to interpret the penal law there in a different way because his political beliefs are different? That's not the way it works. And that's what's happening in this country, which to me is totally disgusting.
Absolutely.
Well, Tommy, if you lose the rule of law, you've lost your country.
And if you lose the cops are the only, cops throughout the country are the only cops agents are the only thing that stands between anarchy. You know what I mean? That's the only line that in this country, you get in trouble, you call for help, that's who's coming to help you. And how anybody could be against, listen, you could look up, I'm not going to get into detail, but you could look up FBI statistics on a lot of stuff that tell the truth. And it's the truth is manipulated. And it's just sad that, everything was fine, until COVID started, there was no trouble in New York. Whatever happened in other states or whatever, it wasn't New York. And then all of a sudden, New York turned upside down. New York's police department, they were criticizing them. What was New York cops doing wrong? Really, what were they doing wrong? I really, it's very hard for me to understand it. And I don't think anybody should ever judge anyone unless they've walked in their shoes. So unless you've been in Kyle Rittenhouse's shoes, you really don't have, from an outside point of view, and you're not one of the jurors that are getting all the evidence and sitting in a room for days deliberating on every piece of it and watching videos, then you really don't have a right to make a decision on what his destiny should have been.
Good point, Tommy. I want to make one quick point about the prosecution too. I watched. There were several. Tommy, you brought up that you had spoken with prosecutors. They were sick to their stomach. They couldn't even watch the trial because they were seeing play out in real time the disgusting things that this prosecution did between holding back the video, sending a blurry video to the defense. And,
misconduct, and they should be held accountable for it.
Absolutely, but I want to.
Because if a detective did that on the stand, or if you wrote down a little note on a matchbook cover because you didn't have a piece of paper for whatever reason and didn't hand it in, and it's discovered afterwards, you then hand it in. You got a mistrial on your hands.
Absolutely. But the other point I was going to make was I watched two different civil rights attorneys recently in the last day or two comment about this trial. Now, I'm not trying to say that civil rights attorneys, they're only going to go on the defendant's side or prosecution side or whatever, but they specifically called out the prosecutors on this case and said, had I been in front of this prosecution or on this trial, I would have immediately called for a mistrial. It would have been, they said they would have been apoplectic about it, meaning they would have been going insane, completely insane, because it was clear what was going on in this trial. It was almost as if, and some of the talking heads on cable news said this, that they wanted a mistrial because they knew that their witnesses screwed up, the prosecution witnesses early on in the trial, that they wanted a mistrial. That way they can get another bite at the apple, a retrial, and then maybe they prep them.
Something takes that long for a verdict, it usually isn't looking good. It looks like people are being, there's a couple of holdouts one way or the other. So, they're trying to go over it and get everybody to become unanimous till the jury finally comes out and says we can't make a unanimous decision and it's a mistrial, or the judge will call them out and ask them what's going on. And if they say they can't make a unanimous decision, he will declare it a mistrial, and I think that's what they wanted. They want another shot at it,
One of the constants in this, and I think we would all agree that Kyle Rittenhouse really shouldn't have gone to Kenosha with an AR-14. I think we all agree with that. But it occurred. He did go there. And then what occurred was ruled by this jury to be self-defense. He killed two people in defense of his life. One of them grabbed at his gun. The other guy pointed a gun at him, and one of them hit him in the head with a skateboard. So one of to me, the most amazing things was one of the prosecutors, the heavyset guy, was talking about how he brought a gun to a fist fight. He forgot that the second guy pointed a gun at him, and he forgot another guy hit him with a 3-foot-long skateboard in the head. And one of the things also was that these individuals that were shot were rioters. They were not victims. They were rioting. Rosenbaum started a fire. That's an arson. That's a B felony. So let's quote the law correctly, counselor. Well, they were rioters. They were not victims.
Well, didn't we see people on the news during the riots in New York while cops were getting the teeth knocked out of their mouth? And I got pictures that were getting sent to me with inspectors, cops, or whatever, wearing white shirts and full of blood with teeth out of their mouth, getting hit in the face with bricks. I've seen cops get hit over the head with garbage cans, kicked and beaten. And you got a newscaster in front of you saying this is a peaceful demonstration, and he's glowing in the dark because there's 18 cars on fire behind him. I mean, is it just me? Maybe I'm, listen.
Tommy, there's a famous
brain surgeon, but you got to be an asshole. And once, you're entitled to protest. Everybody has their right to an opinion. But once you throw a bottle, it's not a peaceful protest no more. It's a
riot. That's
well,
right.
Tommy, it was funny. There was a report that CNN was doing, and I forgot which city it was. But the reporter's going, these are mostly peaceful protests, and the whole behind them was lit on fire. It was like a whole block was on fire.
I don't watch the news. I don't read the newspaper. I can't take what I see no more. You know what? Republican, Democrat, I'm waiting for a TV news channel that's totally like in the middle that tells the truth. that just says like they're not pushing for one way, they're not pushing for another way. All they're pushing for is for the right thing to be done. And it just seems like everything in this country is going haywire. Common sense has been thrown out the window. And it's got nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. You know what I mean? My family, my grandparents, my mother, they were long-time Democrats, so I'm not putting any party down. It's just that it seems that common sense has gone out the window. Defund the police. Like Minnesota had some election. My sister lives out there where they were almost, it was coming up where they were voting to do away with the police department. Like,
Yeah, they had a vote on that.
I mean, are you kidding me or what? Like, sometimes you almost want them to win and then see what's going to happen afterwards. Who are you going to call? A social worker with a paper and a pen? They're not going to go to the house. You know what
Tommy,
I mean?
I don't know about a newscast or a channel, but I know about a podcast that goes right down the middle. It's called Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. And our opinions.
Listen, we don't go, anytime I've been on the show, we don't condone doing anything bad. Some people have problems with the people that we talk to, but, what do cops do? You talk to criminals, and you're talking, you're learning, it's debates, it's interesting, but it's not like this is a biased, podcast. It's very open for suggestion. It's very educated, and not the three of us aren't always 100% right, or we don't claim to be 100% right. We're giving not even our own opinion. We're giving stuff that's so black and white and common sense that it's almost ridiculous to have to justify it. You know what I mean? It really is. It's sad.
I just wanted to raise this issue. And we saw it all last year and during the whole COVID thing when there were riots all over the country in regards to Derek Chauvin and even New York City. And the thing is, to me, is shame on the governments that allow riots to occur. And shame on New York City is one of them. Shame on the mayors that hold their police back and don't let them do their job. Shame on the governments that allow rioters to burn down businesses. Shame on them.
Well, let me ask you a question. Why did de Blasio and all these people, I've heard them say peaceful protests. But meanwhile, Eric Adams, who, thank God de Blasio is going to be leaving office and Eric Adams is taking over. And when they're threatening riots, if he does certain things with the police department, which is Eric Adams' rights, especially as a retired police captain, and spent many years in the police department. And he's saying, not in my city, So it seems that, they could threaten all they want. He's not being intimidated. And it's got nothing to do with race. There were all kinds of nationalities and different ethnicities involved in these riots. But whether you're white, black, green, purple, or yellow, if you start a riot, I think once Eric Adams takes over, I think he's going to let the police do what they have to do. And, you all remember the Washington Heights riots, the Crown Heights riots, Washington Square Park riots. I was at all of them. And for a couple of hours, it was back and forth whether they were going to let anybody do anything. But once they gave the thumbs up to end it, it was over, fast. And you never heard any, repercussions over it. That's what the police are there for. They're not there to hurt anybody, but they're not there to be abused, spit on, hit. You don't go to work as a cop to be, abused physically. Verbally is one thing. Physically is a whole other story. And I watched videos that made me sick, watching guys getting hit and beat and nobody doing nothing about it. It really is. It's like, if they're going to do that to a cop, then what are they going to do to a civilian?
Tommy, and I have to give you applause on that, because what you just said makes the most sense. The police, once there's a protest and they throw a bottle or rock, it now becomes a riot. They need to quickly restore order, put a stop to it, put it down. And this theory of letting the people burn off energy and destroy and burn property,
Go
that's
join a
got to
boxing
stop.
gym and hit a heavy bag if you got energy to burn off, you know?
Exactly. Go do that in a gym. You're not doing it in public property. And I'm just hoping and praying, Tommy, that you're right, that Eric Adams stick with what he says and said, I'm not doing it's not going to happen in my city, not in my city. Listen, no, we don't want to unleash the police to brutalize people, but to
No.
restore order and do the right thing. 100%, Tommy.
Guys, if you like podcasts from a police perspective, taking on the major cases of the day, please subscribe to Police Off the Cuff. You can go on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, ring that bell, give us a thumbs up. We also have a Patreon if you'd like to support us. We have a membership. You want to join Police Off the Cuff as a member and get additional content, be part of the Police Off the Cuff family. We have like 6 levels. The first one is the bucket for $2.99 a month, $6.99 a month. You can have coffee with Cannon, $9.99 a month. You can polish my rack, $24.99 a month. You're dipped in butter, and for the premiere, $49.99 a month. You got heated dipped in butter. So if you'd like to join us, we would love to have you guys. This is a spokesperson for the Rittenhouse family. I'm just going to see what we're going to play what he has to say on here.
Next to Wendy Rittenhouse as the verdict came in, what was her reaction? What was your reaction to the verdict?
One of relief. It's been a long road, and so we believe that was the right verdict. We believe that the length of time was the jury being very careful in reading the instructions and looking over the evidence. But look, there's no spiking of football. There's 2 people did lose their lives. There was a lot of things that infected this case, like politics, that's sent it off the rails really early on. And so there are no winners. I mean, Kyle now gets to live his life as a free young man, an innocent young man, which he is. But at the end of the day, I mean, there are no winners. I believe this is a inflection point for this country that we should try to bridge the divide right now. And we should try to come together, right? This is a moment that I think the country can use. Get united, to try to get united, to have conversations, to sit across the table.
Have you talked to Kyle at all since the verdict came?
No. They left immediately. They went out the back door for security reasons. We wanted to get him off site. So,
what's next for him?
College. He can be an 18-year-old young man. He's studying prerequisites at Arizona State University and for nursing, and he's going to continue that. And we're going to do everything we can to make sure he can live as normal of a life moving forward as possible. But I think you're going to see some good things that come out of Kyle in the future, because he's a very, very pragmatic young man, right? That's been through a lot. And there's so many pieces of this case that touch every issue in modern day contemporary politics, right? But at the end of the day, this case was always about self-defense and nothing else. It wasn't about politics. It was not about race. It was a case about, did he defend himself when attacked? And he absolutely did. And thank God that the jury came to that conclusion. But look, I'll say it again. There are no winners in this, but this is an opportunity to have some discussions that I think should be had.
And David Hancock, Channel 12 in Milwaukee here, ABC. We're live as well, and I just want to introduce you to our viewers. You've been with the Rittenhouse family this whole time, and I was in the courtroom and I saw you, Wendy, really kind of held on to your arm tightly. what did you feel from her in that moment when they read the verdict?
Relief. I mean, a year, some odd months of just having just having her son be defamed, for lack of a better term, but
Amazing, right? When you think about it, here you are, 1 minute you're standing up, and it's either going to be freedom or 60 years in prison.
And let me tell you something. You know, unless you've walked in those shoes and realize, I don't think anybody realizes, like he said, there are no winners. And nobody, you know, unless you've been in those shoes, to be accused of something that you're innocent of, and to go through the not knowing what's going to happen to your life when you know you did nothing wrong, and you have overzealous prosecutors trying to put you in prison, that will stick with you for the rest of your life. It will never leave you. It definitely emotionally gets to you. And you know, there are still people out there that are going to consider him like a murderer, which is, you know, very wrong, but he has to live with that, as a lot of other people have in the past. And I don't think people really, everybody's easy to talk who've never been through any kind of diversity in their life, especially something like this. But trust me, it sticks with you. It never leaves you, and it'll stay with you till you take your last breath. And what that gentleman said, there are no winners in this. He's correct. But when you act in a certain way, and there's a reaction that comes back at you because of your actions, then it's the person that acted that way that brought those actions on. So he did not attack anybody. He didn't put anybody's life in danger. His life was in danger. And he reacted because, you know, you're in panic mode. Your adrenaline is flowing. You know, you're trying to not die for no reason at all. He would have just been a statistic that got killed. And I wonder what they would have done to the people that killed him if they did kill him. You know, so nobody really understands. You know, I'm not saying nobody really understands. A lot of people who will be, you know, bad mouthing this interview by us have never been through any kind of diversity. So, you know, again, like I say, if you haven't been through it, you ain't got nothing to say.
Good point, Tommy. Good point. You know, the fact that the criminal justice system is really based on intent. Now, I agree with you, Billy. I wish his father would have stopped him when he was going out the door. If his father was there or not, I don't know. But if somebody would have stopped him and said, listen, why are you going there, you know, with a gun and trying to protect? But you got to look at his intention. His intention, and he was interviewed before all this shit broke out where the shooting started. He was caught on an interview by a reporter. He had the gun on. What are you doing here? He said, I'm here to put out fires. I'm here to give first aid. I'm a medic. And he had the gun. Why do you have the gun? He goes, well, I have the gun only to protect myself. The gun was fully exposed. It met all the requirements of the law with the size of the barrel. It wasn't concealed. So again, should he have been there? In my opinion, if he was my son, no, I wouldn't have wanted him there. I would have tried to stop him, even though he had good intention. And there's that old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. There's probably nothing more true than that. His intentions were good. Now he got caught up in it. He tried to retreat. He tried to run. They attacked him from behind. Now he was left with no alternative, especially when they were grabbing at his gun to fire shots and try and defend himself. And it still didn't cease. There was 3 incidents where he had to fire his gun. So the bottom line is that that's actually the picture where he's explaining. He's got his medic bag on his left hip, and he has the gun across his chest, and he's got the gloves on. He put out fires. There was no question that he did that. He had fire extinguisher. He even went there with a bulletproof vest, but he gave the bulletproof vest to another one of his friends. So what was the intent? That's what the law looks at. Did he intend to go there to hurt somebody or kill somebody or cause somebody harm? No, his intent was to put out fires, render first aid, and protect that used car business, or I don't know if it was a new car or used car business, but to protect that car business. Things went awry. He tried his best to retreat, which he didn't even have to do by the law, and he wound up in the situation he was in. Now there's the rifle. I believe it's you're saying AR-14, Billy. Is that what you know? Or
Yeah, that's what. No, well, that's what I was. That's what I've read. There was an AR-14. I'm not a huge gun person.
I thought AR-15, but okay, 14,
It could be. It could be an AR-15.
Yeah,
I'm not positive. I don't know really the differences in an AR-14 and 15. And but people in the chat are calling it. They get it from the media, an assault rifle. What is an assault rifle? That's what I would like to know. If the media can define.
There's no Billy. If you're in the gun world, there's absolutely no description or no.
If it was a 22.
Right. If it can cause you a death, it's a weapon. That's it. End of story.
Bottom line,
Yeah.
Weapon, and what their intentions are with that weapon to use it. You know what I mean?
Billy, could you put that picture up of the weapon again? I just want to make a point about that real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Tommy. Now look at that gun. Now look how menacing that gun is. Any rifle is menacing. Now, I'm not sure if you guys saw this, but during the summation, the guy in the gray suit to the left there, the prosecutor, he pointed that gun at the jurors with his finger on the trigger. Now, we know from gun safety, you never point the gun at anyone unless you're intending to shoot to kill. And you especially don't have your finger on the trigger. That moron in the gray suit to the left there, and I'm going to call him a moron because I think it was pretty stupid that he displayed horrible gun safety by pointing that firearm at the jury with his finger on the trigger. Another thing that he did misconduct-wise.
He did that to instill fear in the jury to think of what the people who were, were shot by it. So he was trying to basically mind screw them. But whether a gun is loaded, unloaded, whatever, that gun should never be pointed at anyone.
It's always supposed to be pointed in a safe direction. Safe direction is down or it's up. It's not at a jury pool. And then what do they tell us all the time? Finger off the trigger when you go to the range. You're not supposed to have your finger on the trigger. Of course, why? That's how accidental discharges happen. Now, that gun probably wasn't loaded, but we don't know for certain. I didn't inspect it. He didn't inspect it. How does he know that gun wasn't loaded?
What would happen to you if you were at the range and your gun was empty and you fired with a revolver and you fired 6 shots? And one of the instructors came over to you, and instead of holstering your weapon, you turned around at the booth with the gun pointed at the booth.
Forget it.
And
they go berserk.
Let's watch this. Let's watch this.
And then raises his left hand to the gun and points.
Real.
There you go. This is it. That was it.
Him putting the fire extinguisher on the ground and then raising the gun.
Well, what do you want him to do? Keep the fire extinguisher in his hand?
That's
you can see his. I don't know if you could see it in that one, but his finger was on the one right before it when he held it up the first time. His finger was on the trigger. There was another angle I saw on the news. His finger was on the trigger and just pointing the gun at them. That alone, whether his finger's on the trigger or not, there it is. You could see his finger was through the trigger guard on the trigger.
And then raising the gun.
What was the point of him saying he put the fire extinguisher on the floor? Really, what was the point? Were you supposed to keep the fire extinguisher in your hand while you pick up a rifle? You know what I'm trying to say?
Nobody told him a rifle is used with 2 hands, so nobody told that prosecutor that.
That guy is a total. Please, I don't even want to talk. I'd love to love to know his background.
Billy, you commented on it earlier too. They were talking about one of the specific people that was injured. I believe it was Rosenbaum. And in summation, not that particular prosecutor, I believe it was co-counsel, the heaviest set guy. He said, well, yeah, he started some fires, almost like, he started a little fire. That was the word he used. He started a little fire. So a little fire turns to a big fire. Yeah, exactly. So
no, but starting a fire in the middle of a riot, that's considered an arson, and an arson is a B as in boy felony.
Back to 15-year sentence.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
First he just kicked over a porta potty, and then he dragged I forget, he dragged something out of the street to block the traffic, and then he started a little fire, and then he did and he was making light of all the things. Real with Robo, thank you for the $5 super chat. Bill, it's an AR-15. Media says assault rifle. It stands for Armalite rifle. The charge was for him crossing lines armed. He didn't. Charge dropped. Right. Well, that was dropped that was dropped before the well, early on in the trial. The judge
Before the
found
jury got the verdict, that was dropped.
yes, that was
before they got
dropped
the
because
case. Yeah.
the judge found that it was not an illegal gun. Lisa Mosley, thank you so much for the $20 super chat. There are threats against Rittenhouse in chat. It needs to stop. Well, people that they're called armchair warriors. They're called keyboard warriors. They're not dangerous. They're just idiots. So don't worry about them.
Listen, the
threatening.
bottom line is that what Tommy said, and I think Bill, you said it too. There are no winners in this case. I mean, this kid he's got to go to bed at night knowing that he nearly was killed and he took 2 lives. Now, I mean, he was defending himself. There's justification for it. It was self-defense, 100%. But deep down, I mean, if you believe in the Catholic faith like I do, you're not supposed, thou shalt not kill. It's one of the 10 commandments, and he killed somebody. So he's going to have to come to terms with that. He's going to have to make peace with his God, whoever it may be. I don't know what his religious background is, but he's got to live with that. And he's probably not going to have an easy time going forward, going to a college. He's probably going to have to do college online based on the fact that his face is all over the media.
That are against them.
Say again, Tom?
He's going to have he's going to face a lot of adversary of people who are against that he's free. And he's not going to have a good time of it. You know what I mean?
Of course.
Eventually, it'll fade out and there'll be something else that takes precedence over him. But for a while, he's going to have a hard time. His life, he's free, but his life of torment is not going to be free. 100%.
Tommy, shame on the media. I don't know if you've been watching much news, but the media really painted this thing. The media painted this thing in a very negative way. They tried to interject race into this. Kyle Rittenhouse is obviously white. All of the people involved in the shooting were all white. Yet you had Black Lives Matter protesting. Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter. Now, Black Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, all lives matter. But where did they come into this? And then the media, I mean, listen, now here's the other thing that I'm thinking of, and I'm sure that this may take place. The president of the United States, before he was elected, Joe Biden, called him a white supremacist. I mean, that's pretty big words to put on somebody. They said he absolutely had no relationship to any white supremacist groups. They gave over his phone, which the government couldn't crack. Now, I'm wondering if they may go after him for civil rights violations. That's probably the next thing, which it's almost like double jeopardy, but they could actually look into this with the federal government to try and charge him with a civil rights violation.
There is no way in the federal system that they can charge. I mean, they could do whatever the hell they want to do because they do.
They do it. They do it, right, Tom? They do it.
But to ever come back with a civil rights violation on him would be totally manipulating the federal statute, of what that means. So I'd be very surprised if they do. I really would be very surprised if they do, because that's not what the federal statute is.
Well, we've seen the federal government go after individuals when they, I believe it was in the Rodney King case out in L.A. The federal government went after them for civil rights violations, and in that case, it probably was appropriate because
in case, that case. I watched that video again. I won't Monday morning quarterback anybody, but if you're looking at that video, okay, that's a civil rights violation.
Right.
And they caused their own problems because from what I saw in the video, I don't know what happened before or after or anything else, but just from watching the video, the Rodney King case was a terrible travesty and a blemish on cops.
All law enforcement. You're right, Tom.
Hurt us.
I agree with you.
Because I don't know any cop that I've ever worked with that we would ever do anything like that. You know what I'm saying? So that, yes, was definitely a civil rights violation. What this kid did, no way in the world. And it's wrong for anybody to label him something that they don't have the facts on, because if he was a white supremacist, you don't think that would have come out at the trial?
100%.
Guys, one thing I just want to raise. Many times, all of us will be on a different side of the fence and disagreeing with the results of a jury, right? Of a jury trial. But we all, as Americans, have to accept what the jury finds, and I accept it. I've accepted at times when I didn't agree with it. I accepted it because you know, you may argue today if you didn't get your way or whatever your political view was on this case, now you're cursing the system. The system works. It does work. And you may not always agree with the results, but the system works.
The system's not a perfect system. No system is, but in a whole, it does work. It obviously worked in this case, even with all the mitigating factors of threats and everything that went on. But if the verdict goes against something you personally disagree in, you know, that's America. You know what I mean? And you can't threaten violence because you disagreed with the decision. You know, it's. I don't know what's happening, and I feel very bad for the road, the way things are going, and the way things are happening, and it's really very sad on watching what goes on. It really is. I just read that. Like I said, I don't know what happened before that video with Rodney King. You know, I just watched the video. So I'm not judging the cops in any which way, shape, or form. All I said was that if you were just watching that video, you know, the Justice Department would have had a right for a civil rights violation. I don't know what I'm not saying that I know anything about what happened before or after that video. I'm just saying just based on that video. That's all.
Anthony Facer, it's sickening when the prosecution stands up there and lies to try and win. Prosecution is there to seek truth. Absolutely disgusting. You know, folks, I said before that I've been on the other side of the fence when I've disagreed with the jury, and yes, I accept it. I'm an American, and this is the system we have. And if they make a decision that I find egregious, I find incorrect, I still must accept it. I don't go out and burn buildings down. I don't go out
and fires, Bill.
No, I don't do any of that.
Okay.
You know, I accept it. And you know, there may be a lot of people that very angry tonight. You know, something. Go home and have a fresca. You know, what can I tell you? Because this is the system we have, and you know, if you don't agree with the verdict, you know, as I said, I don't agree with every verdict that comes down either. But I don't go out and riot over it. You know.
You know, Billy, we always, and I said it earlier on the show that I was kidding around with Tom when he said he wants to see a news agency or a channel that kind of, you know, goes right down the middle. We've had disagreements with Joe Murray, and I wish he was on with us tonight, and I'm sure he'll be commenting on this somewhere, some way, somehow. And, you know, I don't know what his opinion on this whole thing is, but we've aired our differences of opinion, whether it be Bill and Joe or me and Joe. And specifically on the Gabby Petito case, we both felt that that Brian Laundrie was guilty right from the beginning, and he was taking the defense attorney side of it. So we had a little disagreement, but at the end of the day, we were respectful. We disagreed with one another, and we allowed the audience to decide what I was saying or what Joe was saying or what Bill was saying, and let them decide what they wanted to believe. And then you can make your own decision. Now, again, you made some great points, Billy. This is the system that we have. It's probably the best system in the world. And unfortunately, it doesn't always come out right. It's not 100%. You know, there are mistakes that are made. But in this particular case, I think the jury got it right. And I was talking about earlier about how the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Well, that's where this young man wound up. He was going to hell, and the jury pulled him out of it because they saw the evidence for what it was.
A cop's, an agent, or a prosecutor's job, they have just as much responsibility to exonerate somebody as they do to convict.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Tom.
One word that makes a great prosecutor, a great agent, a great detective, and I don't care what says where or what patrol guide, it's discretion and common sense. So you have as much, if you see that there's something, you know, political pressure on arresting somebody or convicting somebody or making a decision based on political pressure, that's not the way the system's supposed to work. It's ridiculous. And if it happens, and it has happened, it's like you can't cause a riot because there's an election and the guy that you wanted to win didn't win the friggin' election. You know what I mean? It just don't work that way. Yep. And that's what seems the new trend is: threaten, intimidate, and they'll get the way, you know, the people who were threatening will get the way they want it to end up. And that's totally not what this country stands for. You know, people have died in war, and people have fought in battles for freedom. Freedom don't come for nothing.
That's right, Tom.
Don't come free.
Yeah.
And forget about the guys that were out there fighting while we were home for freedom. And they're taking those liberties away from us right now. And those guys are rolling in their grave because people don't, you know, they're dead and gone, and people forget what they did and what they went through, and how this country at one time was so united and so patriotic. After 9/11, did you ever see more American flags hanging out car windows? Everybody, you know, polite to each other because we were all one. And that's what we are. We're all one. And I believe other countries right now are laughing at us. I think they're laughing at us by the way we're acting. And it's, to me, it's disgraceful. It really is. I never thought I'd see this in my lifetime. And I don't think I'm going to see it change. I think I'll be dead and gone before anything gets better. I worry about my children.
You know, guys, I just want to shift gears for a second. I want to show a little bit of the cross-examination of Kyle Rittenhouse by the prosecutor in this case.
Everybody that you shot at that night, you intended to kill, correct?
I didn't intend to kill them. I intended to stop the people who were attacking me.
By killing them.
I did what I had to do to stop the person who was attacking me.
By killing them.
2 of them passed away, but I stopped the threat from attacking me.
By using deadly force.
I used deadly force.
That you knew was going to kill.
I didn't know if it was going to kill them, but I used deadly force to stop the threat that was attacking me.
You intentionally used deadly force against Joseph Rosenbaum, correct?
You said deadly.
You intentionally used deadly force against the man who came and tried to kick you in the face,
Yes.
correct? You intentionally used deadly force against Anthony Huber, correct?
Yes.
You intentionally used deadly force against Gage Grosskreutz, correct?
Yes.
With regard to Joseph Rosenbaum, you fired 4 shots at him, correct?
Yes.
You intended to kill him, correct?
No.
I didn't intend to kill him. I intended to stop the person who was attacking me and trying to steal my gun.
Since August 25th,
Can't even
2020,
look at this guy.
first time
I would have got up and smacked him in the mouth.
told your story.
Sustained.
This is the force I'm using to strike you, you stupid.
You've had the benefit of watching countless videos of your actions that night, correct?
I've seen certain videos, not all of them. I've seen the majority of them actually here during the trial.
You've also had the opportunity to read articles. People have written interviews, things like that, about what happened that night, correct?
I do my best to avoid what people write on the internet. A majority of it, it's not true.
You have also sat here through 8 days of trial, correct?
Yes.
And you've had the opportunity to watch all of the videos that have been
Yes.
played in this trial.
Yes.
Sir, if you could please let me finish my question before answering. And I will do my best to let you finish your answer before I go on to the next question. Fair?
Yes.
You've also had the opportunity to listen to the testimony of all 30-some witnesses that have testified in this trial so far, correct?
Yes.
And after all of that, now you are telling us your side of the story, correct?
Correct.
I'm going to ask you folks to go in the library for just a second. Please don't talk about the case.
He's commenting on my client's right to remain silent.
No, Your Honor. I am making the point that after hearing everything in the case, now he's tailoring his story to what has already been introduced.
The problem is, this is a grave constitutional violation for you to talk about the defendant's silence. And that is, you're right on the borderline, and you may be over, but it better stop.
Good judge. Great judge.
This is, I can't think of the case, the initial case on it, but it's this is not permitted. All right, ask the jury to come in, please. Sustain the objection.
You were armed with an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle that evening, correct?
Yes.
You had it loaded with 30 rounds of full metal jacket ammunition, correct?
Yes.
That weapon with 30 rounds is capable of killing at least 30 people, correct?
Yes.
You had arranged to have Dominic Black purchase that weapon for you in Ladysmith, Wisconsin in early May of 2020. Is that correct?
We were up north shooting and not shooting. We were up north going camping, and Dominic Black brought his rifle, and we were talking. I was like, "Hey, what if we get a rifle for me? I'll give you the money. You can purchase it. It's yours until I'm 18." So I bought the rifle for Dominic, and I can use it. But once I'm 18, we can do a private sale, and we can have it turned over to my name once I turned 18.
Because you knew as a 17-year-old, you could not have that gun, correct?
I knew I could not buy that gun.
You knew you could not possess that gun also, correct?
No.
You weren't aware that under Wisconsin law,
I'm going to instruct the jury later about the law. So, and that he wouldn't, but
See what I mean? He's supposed to instruct them on the law, not the prosecutor.
So, it was unlawful for him to purchase the gun.
it wasn't just unlawful for you to purchase it, it was unlawful for you to bring it home, correct?
In Illinois, I wasn't able to bring it home because I didn't have a FOID card, a firearm owner identification card.
You
in
knew
Illinois.
You knew in Illinois that you couldn't get that until you turned 18, correct?
No, you can get a FOID card at 16 in Illinois.
But you didn't have one.
I did not.
And even after this gun was purchased for you in May, you never got one after that either, did you?
Actually, I applied for a FOID card in May of 2020, but due to the charges, and there was a backlog in Illinois for the FOID card, but after you filed the charges against me, it was denied because of the charges here in this state.
You found out about that after you were criminally charged in this case?
I found out about this in November of 2020. A letter was sent to my old residence.
So you knew that without that FOID card, the gun could not go back to your residence in Illinois, correct?
Correct.
And you agreed that the gun would be kept at Dominic Black's stepfather's house here in Kenosha, correct?
Because he had a safe, yes.
And you agreed that you wouldn't have access to that gun, correct?
We agreed that the only time I would use the gun is when I was with him and we would go to like the Bristol shooting range or up north to his land.
But the only time prior to the night of August 25th, 2020, that you ever used that gun was up in Ladysmith, correct?
Correct.
So you didn't go to the Bristol shooting range ever.
I
with that
did.
gun.
Not with that rifle, but I did.
Pay attention to my question, please. You didn't ever go to the Bristol shooting range with that gun, correct?
Correct.
And you picked out that gun because Dominic had it, correct?
Yeah.
You could have, if you wanted to, chosen from any number of guns that were for sale. Fair enough?
That were at that store. There weren't many, but yes.
I'm sure the store in Ladysmith isn't the only store that sells guns, correct?
You can ask questions.
That was a question.
No, it was a statement.
Isn't it correct, Mr. Rittenhouse, that there are other places to purchase guns besides that one store in Ladysmith, Wisconsin?
I believe so, but that's where we're at. So that's where we got the gun.
And you, if you wanted to, could have given Dominic Black money to purchase a gun at other locations. Fair?
Didn't cross my mind, but now that you say it, yeah.
Why did you pick or want Dominic Black to buy for you an AR-15 as opposed to a pistol or a shotgun or some other type of rifle?
I cannot legally possess or carry a pistol because I'm not 18 in Wisconsin. I believe it's 18 in Wisconsin for a pistol. But with the rifle, I knew I could possess that rifle. I knew I couldn't buy it, but I knew I could like take it to like the shooting range or possess it. And with shotguns, they didn't have any shotguns in stock. That was my original plan, to get a shotgun for trap shooting, but there weren't any at that Lady Smith store, and I didn't want to go to Walmart and buy one.
So your understanding at that time was that Wisconsin law prohibited you as a 17-year-old from possessing a pistol, but you could have an AR-15?
Yes.
What was that understanding based on?
The understanding was based on when we would go up north. It was me, Dominic, and my sister, and we were allowed to carry the rifles around, and the officers over there said it was fine.
I'm going to move to strike as hearsay. What officers would have told
You
me.
asked the question on what the source of his knowledge was. It's not admissible, and none of this is, frankly, and that's why I interrupted before. What the defendant believes the law to be, what the district attorney believes the law to be, what the defense believes the law to be, are irrelevant. I will tell you when I instruct you what the law of Wisconsin is pertaining to the possession of a firearm by a person under 18, and that'll be the source of your knowledge.
So, it was clear that it turned out that he did legally possess that gun. And because there was an addendum in the law, if it was under a certain inches overall, a 17-year-old could legally possess it. So, a lot of the law that he was citing was in fact incorrect.
He should have answered when he kept edging them on that his intent was to kill them. I mean, I can't tell you what was in his head, but he should have said, my intent wasn't to kill anyone. My intent was to stop the threat.
Well, that's pretty much what he said.
Yeah,
He did
that is
say
basically what he said, Tom. He basically did say that.
Prosecutor kind of got he kept insisting, like,
No, the defense attorney should have objected and said, Your Honor, asked and answered. He answered the question 3-4 times. I mean, he was badgering the witness.
I'm very surprised he didn't object,
Yeah. I don't know why he didn't, but I was surprised at that myself.
Was intervening, and that judge was excellent, very fair and very impartial, and I think it was a fair trial.
Listen, for a 17-year-old kid, I think he did good on the stand. I think it's always risky to put your client on the stand, and most defense attorneys will tell you that.
If you're telling the truth, it's not hard to testify.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, depending on the client, depending on the case, the circumstance, you have somebody with a long criminal history, and even though they're innocent, if you put them on the stand, that opens the door to the prosecution going after them for their criminal record and stuff. So obviously, with this kid, he didn't have a criminal record or anything like that, and I think the law really was clear. As long as he didn't conceal that rifle, as long as it was a certain length on the barrel, he was fully in compliance with the law to carry that in Wisconsin. He said,
Phil, this is where the judge rules on the law. So let's just listen to this.
Go ahead.
Oh, wait a minute. I screwed up. Hang on one second. Yeah, I got to put it back up. Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
There's so many things to do when you're the director, the talent,
you're the producer, the director, and everything else.
The director, and it's tough.
Pivotal moments inside the Kenosha County Courthouse.
So when you consider this case, look for the truth.
Prosecutors addressing the jury for a final time, trying to convince them 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse had intent to kill.
This is a case in which a 17-year-old teenager killed 2 unarmed men and severely wounded a third person with an AR-15 that did not belong to him. This isn't a situation where he was protecting his home or his family.
Rittenhouse is facing multiple charges, including homicide for shooting and killing 2 people and injuring another during protests last year over the police shooting of Jacob Blake.
Everything this community went through, the only person who shot and killed anyone was the defendant.
The teen and his attorneys claim he was acting in self-defense. The judge now allowing jurors to consider lesser charges, which could be a break for the prosecution. In an unusual moment, sending the jury out of the courtroom to speak with attorneys about whether it was clear to jurors the lesser charges should not be considered if they find Rittenhouse acted in self-defense.
This is a more complicated case than most, than any, frankly, that I can remember.
500 National Guard troops are standing by and ready to go in case the city sees any unrest when the verdict comes down. You can see right behind us here that protesters are already gathering outside the courthouse.
Well, I apologize. The judge actually didn't, in that video, didn't rule about the gun, but he had dismissed the gun as illegally carried because of it was turned out that it wasn't illegal and because of the size of it, and it was never also people kept harping on the fact that it was brought over state lines, and that never occurred either because it was always in Kenosha. So that was something that was created by the media, and it in fact never occurred.
That specific clip that you played, Billy, I was actually watching that live, and what the judge made a point of doing on, and I think he was dead on correct, they had brought in these lesser charges, but there was a little bit of discussion between the judge, the prosecutors, and the defense attorneys that if they found on the higher charge that he did act in self-defense, then the lesser charge could not be included to be considered. They said that once they found on a specific charge that it was self-defense was the defense in the for that specific charge, they couldn't go with the lesser charge. They ruled on that, and I think it was quite correct. And I'm sure that Joe Murray or any good attorney or prosecutor would agree on that.
Well, Joe Kane in the chat, retired Captain Joe Kane from Finest Financial, who happens to be my accountant. He says, "Sorry, I'm late. I'm sure you've heard NYPD is held over pending unrest." So
I'm sure
here it is. This, something that happens in Wisconsin,
and it comes back to New York, like the other thing it always does. I mean, the riots over the summer had nothing to do with anything that happened. Eric Adams was the mayor right now.
Yeah.
So do I, Tommy. And you know what? Anybody wants to go out there and protest, we have a constitutional right to do that. Peacefully protest. Not tell me it's peaceful and there's fires burning and cops being assaulted and civilians being assaulted and property being damaged. That's not peaceful.
And you get a reporter on talking, like nicely, and they're protesting peacefully, and he's glowing in the dark. They don't even need lights for the camera.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It's like a joke. It's a joke. It really is. It's a joke.
And listen, starting a little fire, starting a big fire. A fire is a fire. It's arson. You can't start little fires.
Start a little fire. That's how most arsons start, with a little fire, with an accelerant, which turns into a blaze. So
right. Exactly.
I just wonder where the whole philosophy of letting rioters vent and let them destroy property and attack police officers, where did that philosophy come from?
Well, this administration that we've had in New York City has kind of enhanced, all of that. And, I remember Andrew Cuomo during the COVID thing, and then all of a sudden the riots started and COVID went on the back burner. They didn't talk about it for weeks. It's like it didn't exist.
Right.
It was like, don't worry about it. Rioters, you won. You got your way. I'm giving you 180 days to tell me how you want the police department to be run. I wanted to throw the television out. I couldn't believe that the governor of New York State made that statement, and he made that statement. You won, and you got 180 days to tell me how you would want the police to be run, defund them, whatever.
He was trying to get in the good graces of the public because he knew he was responsible for 15,000 deaths in a nursing home scandal, that he sent people infected with COVID into the highest category of risk, elderly people, and 15,000 people died. So he was trying to get into the good graces.
Nobody I talked to was he getting in good graces with that statement.
Oh, not in our worlds, maybe, but in the protesters' world. And do you know, Tom, most of the people that were arrested during that summer Summer Melee that we went through 2 summers ago, all of those rioters, most of the charges were dropped, and that's
I heard that they in Manhattan they were all dropped.
I guess depending on the severity. I mean, if they have you on videotape clubbing the cop over the head with a fire extinguisher, I would hope that wouldn't have been dropped,
Why?
but it may be.
Guys were burning police cars and just walking away with no identification on who they were. I'm sure there's guys who burnt cars. I think it was $1 million in damage to police police department property during those riots. Are you
Yeah.
kidding?
I think it was well over $1 million, Tom.
I'm just saying, like, throwing out a number that I had heard at one point. It's like, what happened? Really, what happened? What happened in the last 2 years?
Well, listen, that's why we have laws, and I just hope that's why we have a police force. We have laws and we have prosecutors, and I just hope that the system works going forward with this new mayor. I mean, we're stuck with him until January, and let's hope that Eric Adams can restore some law and order.
I believe Eric Adams will not be intimidated by anybody, and I believe, listen, he was a cop, he was a sergeant, he was a lieutenant, he was a captain, and I believe he will, at the end of the day, do the right thing and back the cops and let the cops do what they're supposed to do, and just make New York a safe place. I have friends that work in other, private industry in Carnegie Hall here and there, and they drive up to New York every day and say, like, you wouldn't believe how disgusting it became again. And it was us that cleaned it up during the Giuliani administration. Remember 42nd and Broadway in narcotics? It was like, I mean, it was fun while you were doing it, but for tourists or things like that, it was a horrible thing.
You're talking about the 80s, right, Tom?
Yeah, and that place became a beautiful place. I used to enjoy just, if I had a doctor's appointment, I would just enjoy spending like the afternoon, if it wasn't cold out, at St. Pat's or by the ice skating ring during Christmas time. You think we didn't lose tourists coming to New York? Who wants to come to New York City right now anymore? And you can't tell me that nobody saw this happening and that people didn't see it happening. Small businesses died, big businesses died that'll never reopen again.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? All the high-end stores boarded up. It's just, it's sad because you saw what New York really was. And 42nd and Broadway was like the Vegas Strip. It was lit up. It was pleasant. There were people walking. There were cops all over the place, and it was a nice place to be. And I from what I understand now, it's totally the opposite. So
I had no hesitation taking my kids there when they were smaller, and we would have a good time. We would walk around. We would go to the Toys R Us store, go on that Ferris wheel. We would really enjoy New York City and Times Square. Now, today, the last time I was in Times Square, my car almost got trampled by some protest, which was probably about 2 months ago, maybe a little more, 3 months ago. And I mean, every time you put on the news, there's a different shooting going on with innocent people getting shot or Molotov cocktails being tossed into a bodega. I mean, the amount of homeless EDPs, and I'll explain EDP, emotionally disturbed persons, the amount of homeless EDPs walking around the city of New York, Manhattan, is ridiculous. I mean, the other boroughs too, but Manhattan, it's like, who's living on the street? I mean, they're having sex in public, defecating, urinating. It's just completely out of control. That's why we got to hope that our new mayor, Eric Adams, is going to turn things around and start enforcing the law and get on top of these prosecutors that refuse to charge people with fare evasion, with the jumping over the turnstile and beating the fare on the subways and the buses, the urinating in public, and all the rest of it that we've gone through, drinking alcohol, and on and on and on.
Real with Robo, this mess started because of the governor's mayors telling DAs not to prosecute these hoodlums. My heroes, morale fell to the, defend the police, not defund. Real. Guys, we're at almost an hour and 15 minutes, and, I don't really like to go much over that. It really did go very fast. There's a lot of issues. There's a lot of emotion in this case, obviously. There were some nasty people in the chat. One of them I just blocked.
They're entitled to their opinion.
Right, but they're not entitled to be nasty though, and I don't need them. I don't need
respectful. You got to be respectful. You
Yeah.
can disagree. You got to be respectful. And if you're not, go find another podcast. It's very simple. We're right down the middle with this. We give our opinions. We're professional, and we always maintain respect. And that's
100%. So, guys, I want to thank. I think we covered this case pretty well, and I want to thank Tommy Dades, who's not a regular but comes on. He's been on a bunch of times, and every time he's on, he gives some really thoughtful opinions. He was a great detective. He's a retired detective. He has a book out called Friends of the Family, and it's about the mafia cops Ippolito and Caracappa, and it's a great book. You want to pick up a copy of it one day. Hopefully that story will become a movie. And also with me all the time, basically lately in the last 3-4 months, is straight out of Brooklyn, Phil Grimaldi. Phil, I'm going to give you the last word, and I'll give Tommy some last words, and then we'll say sayonara.
Last word. We covered a lot of the Kyle Rittenhouse case today. There's probably other stuff. Maybe we'll go through it again on another day. But I think the jury saw through all of the nonsense that the prosecution put up. They gave the right verdict, the correct verdict. I'm very satisfied with it. One quick thing. I forgot to tell you about this, Bill. I had a conversation last night with Sandy Blue Eyes Favuzzi, who's very close bodyguard, confident friend of Chaz Palminteri. I asked him to come back on the show with Chaz to do the podcast. He agreed. He said, we're just going to figure out a date. Hopefully over the weekend or early next week, we'll have a date that we could get Chaz Palminteri back on the show. He's got a great podcast. He's obviously a great actor, been in 70 movies. He's been on the show before, so that'll be something to look forward to. Shout out to Sandy Blue Eyes for making it happen for us. Hopefully early next week, we'll have a date on when we're going to have Chaz Palminteri back on. Bronx Tale legend.
That's
Yes.
excellent. Tommy Dades, last words.
My last words. Your show is always intriguing, interesting, fair. You give everybody a fair shake. Any of the guests that are on, whether they're on the other side of the fence or our side of the fence, it's a very interesting show. You're going to get people that are going to disagree, but that's good because that means you're making your points very strong. And, that's what makes them come back at you, because if you were a non-entity, they would have nothing to say back. I also want to just say to friend the Phillies too, but both of you were a major asset to the NYPD and a loss when you both retired. I just want to send my condolences out to Detective First Grade John Bodo's family, who passed away recently and was one of the sharpest detectives and one of the only people in the union of the DEA that I ever really thought was a union man, and was a true union guy, and was a legend, and took me under the wing when I was a wet behind the ears rookie, and the quotes and the things that I learned from him. I just want to wish his family God bless, and may John rest in peace. He was a beautiful man.
John Bodo, good man.
Thank you, Tommy. Thank you guys for being on the show. And folks, on behalf of Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories, myself, Bill Cannon, and my co-host, Phil Grimaldi, and our special guest today, Tommy Dades, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon, and be safe out there.
Stay safe, everyone.
Good night.
One episode just ain't enough.